So, John, with Qik Joe working so fast on ice melt, do you think it could help me melt the awkwardness of my neighbor when I forget their name when I'm walking out of the house in the morning?
Maybe if you were to hand them a shaker jug and maybe they, say, since I have one at my house, can you write your name on yours?
Hello and welcome to Shelf Confidence, a podcast brought to you by the Pennsylvania Food Merchants Association that focuses on the trends and innovations in the food and beverage industry. I'm John Zimmerman, your host, and today I'm happy to welcome John Wesolowski, president of Milazzo Industries. They are probably best known for their signature ice melt product, Qik Joe. With winter upon us, we're very excited to have him on. Thank you so much for joining us today, John.
Thank you for having me.
I'd love to know a little bit more about the history of your company. If you could tell me a little bit about where you guys came from and the genesis of all this, that'd be fantastic.
So the company started back in 1929 when Carmen Milazzo, he noticed that there was a need, and back then they needed to have a delivery of fruits and vegetables and other items to the local community. So that went on for some time. His son, Joe Milazzo, took over the business upon Carmen's passing. Joe was kind of an innovator, looked for other things over and above the local deliveries. So he opened up a hardware store. He opened up a few other retail outlets. He had some gas stations, but he also started dabbling in manufacturing. It was kind of unique back then. He wanted to expand, obviously, beyond where he was working in the local Pittston community, northeastern Pennsylvania. So he started dabbling in charcoal briquettes, and he invented the process of he created instant light charcoal.
Really?
So we were the first company to have instant light charcoal. And in addition to being able to say that we invented instant light charcoal, he had a distribution, if you're back then, all the way as far as Binghamton, New York. Now, that may not seem very far today, but back then that was across country for them.
Yeah.
And it was great distribution. He primarily into the grocery trade. He also had bagged coal. He developed an animal repellent, different fertilizers. So he was a bit of an entrepreneur in his own little way and an innovator. And he had that spirit. Now that spirit was passed on to his son, Sam Milazzo, upon Joe's passing, took over the hardware store. And of course, he helped him during those years and noticed that the manufacturing side was growing and there was far more opportunity than being with the hardware channel. So he closed all the other retail outlets and focused fully on the hardware side. But he also noticed that every product they had was very much oriented towards spring and summer, early fall. So they needed a counter seasonal item, and that's when he introduced Qik Joe Ice Melt. So that was in and around 1969, 1970 that he introduced Qik Joe Ice Melt, which is a calcium chloride pellet. Now, the calcium chloride product was primarily used on the commercial end, more on the 50-pound bags, 100-pound drums, larger totes, and again, strictly commercial. He was the first to put calcium chloride in a retail package. He stuck with what they knew. They knew they wanted to serve the grocery trade, the hardware channels, the small mom and pop convenience stores. And of course, they're not carrying the larger bags. So we were the first to put them in shaker jugs, 10-pound bags, and even 20-pound bags. So when Sam took the company over, his wife, Elizabeth, which we say was the brains of the operation, she came on, she was a nurse, and she came on and started working with Sam and helping, let's just say, keep the ship straight. And she was instrumental in that. Their son, Joe, came on working with them. Sam passed, unfortunately, in 2003. So Joe took over as president of the company upon his dad's passing and worked side by side with his mom, Elizabeth. And I was obviously working there as well. Joe was instrumental in my development as well as Sam. So the three of us worked together to help continue the dream of the company of growing and having more distribution. And it's knock on wood, everything was going very well. Unfortunately, we lost Joe in 2019. He had a long illness and he was very much missed. And then we lost Elizabeth in 2021. So I had taken over when Joe had passed away in 2019 with the help of my wife, which is Sam and Betty's daughter, Nadine. So she's a little tougher than her mother, so she keeps the boat straight now. And
I understand that. My wife keeps our boat at home straight all the time. I hear you on
yes,
that.
we work very well together. And again, a family business isn't always the easiest, but you have to get along with the people you're working with. And we not only work well together, but we also, the employees we have, we look at them as family. And it's the only way for the company to continue to grow. Upon Elizabeth's passing, it was during the COVID period or in and around that, there were some opportunities that kind of fell in our lap that we sought out other products, counter seasonal products, just because you had to. You started to see the demand changing. Some of the hardware channels, the customers weren't there. They were, people were retiring. They weren't reopening. No one was taking over their hardware stores. So we started to kind of diversify our manufacturing on what we're doing, and we can further talk about the items we offer over and above the winter goods a little later on.
Oh, yeah.
But it's what keeps the company going. And again, we still have that mentality of small business because we still are, and we struggle like everyone else. But I think we do well for what we are.
No, I think that's great. I love your story because it's a family business. I mean, this is multiple generations going back quite
I
a
think
while.
we are on our fourth generation, and we have a few people in that, with the family. My daughter Adriana, our son-in-law Kyle, son-in-law Jeff, our son Hunter will be finishing college soon. So we're looking at the next generation. As long as our customers support us, we want to make sure that we're there for them and give them the quality products, and we maintain that and continue to grow.
Obviously, during winter season, ice melt's really important. It's an essential part of safety. But if you could talk to me a little bit about, how this contributes to household safety and why it's important, that would be really great.
Some people look at de-icing as just, you're throwing money away because we have to buy a bag of whatever product you're whatever the flavor is that you like to, whether it's a rock salt or a special color bag. But de-icing is vital in the winter months. First of all, safety prevents slips and falls. If anyone out there, and I'm sure most of you, especially in the snow belt region, has done a nasty spill, I know I've done I'm klutzy in the summertime, so I know I'm falling in the wintertime. But it helps prevent those slips and falls, which could then lead to other issues. It ensures safety for vehicles, when they're putting product on the roads, to make sure that we don't have slips and, of course, accidents. Accessibility not only to your home, but to your business. You need to maintain that clean area, protecting your property, limiting your liability, which probably as a business owner, and even a homeowner, especially, the sue happy world that we live in, you need to limit the liability. And what's the best way is you need to make sure that your walkway is safe and free of ice and snow. And then using ice melters reduces your time, and you don't have to go out and shovel and constantly sweep off that given walkway.
So everyone loves their pets, and many pet owners are concerned about chemicals in their ice melt. Can you talk to us about the importance of pet-friendly ice melt options and how Qik Joe addresses those concerns?
So pet owners, and I'm guilty as anyone else, we look at our pet as a family member because they truly are.
Oh yeah.
It's not the days of where it was a hunting dog or a dog out in a coop. That dog sleeps sometimes in the same bed with you, at your feet or sometimes on your head. So you want to make sure they're safe. I always say, and I've often said, most ice melters, for the most part, are relatively safe to a pet if common sense and good housekeeping is managed. Now, that's not always the case, but the way what a consumer has to understand is, yes, there is a focus on pet-friendly products. The product needs to do its work. So allow the product to do its work. Now, every product works in a different way, and I can get into how ice melters work for people to understand, for them to say, okay, I can't put the ice melt on the walkway and allow our pet to walk on it because the product hasn't had an opportunity to do what it's meant to do. So if I can explain how an ice melter works, it might help people understand why it's important to allow the product to do the process. So we're going to compare two de-icers that are commonly known out there. One is, of course, our Qik Joe de-icer, Qik Joe instant ice melter. And then we'll talk about rock salt, which is probably the most commonly used de-icer, mainly because of its availability and its price point. Now let's talk about rock salt. So rock salt, solid form, we all know that crystal. You open the bag or you use a shaker jug, you sprinkle it on your walkway. Now let's say it is 20 degrees outside. That product's going to sit there. It is not, number one, rock salt cannot work to 20 degrees. Its effective temperature is 22 Fahrenheit.
Really?
So at 20 degrees, it's just going to sit there. What it provides at that point is grit or traction. Now, what you need for a rock salt is some kind of catalyst, an activator of some sort. Now, it could be a car driving on the road, generating some solution. It could be people walking, a good number of people walking on that area, getting that ice to kind of create that little liquid on the surface. Perhaps maybe you're lucky and the temperature raises a little bit and the sun comes out and melts a little bit of the ice. So when that salt crystal comes in contact with moisture, it starts to dissolve. And that liquid brine is what is the magic. Liquid brine of the salt does the melting. Now, again, it's only going to work to 22 above zero, but let's assume it's in and around its effective temperature. It will melt the ice and snow. But when that temperature drops at a certain to below its effective temperature, it's not effective anymore. It perhaps may even freeze and expand. And that's where you might have freeze-thaw cycles, which could cause concrete damage that you've got to be concerned. Now, the other concern on rock salt or items with rock salt is that white residue. We're all familiar with the white residue on the walkway or on our boots.
In the house is what I'm familiar with. Yep.
What that means is rock salt is naturally a solid. When it becomes a liquid brine, it is not in its natural state. Then once it does its melting or does what action it needs to do, it seeks its natural state. Well, the closest it could get to a natural state is a white powdery residue. And that's where that residue comes into play. So now let's jump on the far extreme, Qik Joe ice melt. Qik Joe ice melt is calcium chloride pellets. Number one, that product works to 25 below zero Fahrenheit. So it has now, the reason you would want a product to work at such a low temperature, even if you live in an area that doesn't typically get into that low of a temperature, is the liquid brine won't freeze when it hits zero, when it hits 5 below, 10 below. That liquid brine is going to stay liquid. So you have less freeze-thaw cycles. But the benefit of calcium chloride, of Qik Joe ice melt, is when you sprinkle it on your walkway, you literally can hear, especially on ice, it starts to crack and pop. It's kind of like Rice Krispies. And what's happening is, number one, it's very hygroscopic. It attracts water when water doesn't exist. It creates its own solution. It is its own catalyst. In the process of turning from a solid form to that liquid brine, it generates a heat. It has an exothermic reaction. So it generates a heat to the point where you don't even want to touch it. So it literally burns a hole through the ice and snow, getting down to the walkway, and then spreading out and melting from the top up. The other benefit, those being three major benefits, the other benefit of calcium chloride is that the product is naturally a liquid. It is put through a process to create it into a pellet. So once it becomes a liquid brine, it's a happy camper. It's sitting where it's always been. So it doesn't want to go back to a solid form. So there is no white residue. There is no powder that you're tracking in. So think of it in this way. When you're putting that ice melt out, you still need for that product to activate. How would an animal act if you were to sprinkle a calcium chloride on the walkway and then allow it to walk immediately on the walkway? It could cause irritation. It could cause burning. If they ingest it, it could burn their mouth. If you allow the animal to walk with rock salt, it could get stuck in their toes. It could cut their toes and cause irritation. So more common sense than anything. Now, there's ice melters out there that are very, more or less oriented towards the safety of the pet, but you also have to know what's in the bag. So, and that's the key. Knowing what's in the bag, not what's on the bag. Marketing is it's kind of a gray zone, and you've got to be very careful if you only rely on that.
Obviously, we're talking about pet-friendly stuff. Could you talk to me a little bit about like how the industry has changed around pet-friendly ice melt over the years?
The industry has taken a strong focus on pet-friendly de-icers. So in the beginning, when the pet, let's say, rage started, urea was the primary product and the product of choice. And urea as a de-icer, truthfully, is less effective than rock salt. Urea works to about 25 above zero. But the benefit of urea is it was non-toxic. It was usually a prill or a pellet. It didn't have the crystal sharp edges. It worked well enough. It wasn't going to work that well unless you did something with it. Now, urea out there is usually colored, so it has a nice color indicator. We had a urea product out there for many years, and we actually treated our product with a product that was the catalyst that activated the urea. The issue with urea is many states are starting to ban urea. Urea has too much, it raises I think it's the phosphates in the water table, where it's causing too much algae in a water table or a watershed. It's killing marine life. It's raising the acidity of the soil. So there's a lot of states that are jumping on let's ban urea for the right reasons. It's not because someone's against the urea industry, and there'll always be a market for urea, but fewer and fewer states you're able to use. So especially in that Chesapeake water table, I know like certain states like perhaps Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New York, not all of those states have hooked up and said 100% rejection of it, but it's going to happen. So what we did was we changed our formulation to go into a magnesium chloride pellet. Now, magnesium chloride pellet is very effective as a de-icer on its own. It has some of the qualities and many of the qualities that calcium chloride has, but it doesn't cause as much burning sensation if the animal was to ingest it. It's more environmentally friendly if you want to. I mean, again, you've got to be careful on how you're using it in good housekeeping and common sense, but it's far more environmentally sound than, say, straight using urea or then using straight calcium, because straight calcium could cause that irritation. So that product, and I'm seeing more and more companies go down the magnesium pellet side of the offering on their raw material because of that. And you're going to start slowly seeing urea phased out. And I would think most companies will do it over the next few years.
No, I feel like I'm in chemistry class all over again. I appreciate that. Thank you for the background on that. Well, I'm on the subject of this. It's a small tangent, if I may ask. How do these interact with gardens? I know we're talking a little bit about pets. How would this interact with a garden, perhaps?
But what you have to worry, the urea we've already talked about, is going to raise the acid level, and depending upon what shrubbery you have, I think some shrubs like acidic, so you might have a beautiful garden. But the way you've got to look at it is, one of the things to decide on when you're using a de-icer, and I'm going to say this again, they're all relatively safe if used as directed. Application rates mean a lot. So, for instance, again, we're going to compare those two products that I talked about. Rock salt application rate is 6 to 8 ounces per square yard. Qik Joe is 2 to 4 ounces per square yard. So what that means is every 50 pounds of Qik Joe, you need 150 pounds of rock salt. It's like over applying a fertilizer. Fertilizer is good for your lawn, but if you over apply it by 3 to 4 times the suggested application rate, you're going to either lose your lawn or brown it to the point where it may never come back. So common sense over application isn't good. More does not mean better. Look at what the application rate on the given walkway is. And even if you're in sensitive areas, maybe you want to even step it down a little bit. The other thing is to make sure you sweep off any residue. Don't allow that residue to sit there. Or if the drainage or the pitch of your walkway is going towards a given flower bed, try to sweep it away from that. Just because over a period of time, especially if it's a harsh winter and you continue to introduce a rock salt, a magnesium chloride, a calcium, potassium, any of those products into that given flower bed, it could cause some issue to the soil where you might have to treat it in a different way come spring. But you have to be very aware of what you're applying.
That makes sense. It keeps coming back to common sense.
Common sense,
Application with the big
unfortunately,
thing.
people rely too much on what is on the front of the package. Turn it over. Read what the manufacturer, the ice melt industry, the people I know, I've been doing this over 30 years. People I know are good people, and they only want the best for their customers, and they only want to put good quality products out. But if the consumer relies solely on the marketing front of the bag and they're missing the important stuff, it's like taking a test and not reading the instructions. You need to look at what's on the back of the bag.
No, it's important to read the instructions. I get into that mistake sometimes when I'm baking things. I'll jump steps. So
Yeah, I tend to do the same. So,
well, cool. So obviously ice melt is a seasonal product. Does Milazzo Industries prepare for fluctuation in demand, especially as winters get lighter and climate change impacts the industry? Could you talk to me a little bit about that?
we've definitely noticed a change in the demand. There's no doubt about it. Now, I'm hoping that, everyone's up and down. Maybe we have a few years of not so harsh winters. We live and die by the winter. It's just, that's our company.
Yeah.
We do. So we have done some different things in this. When my wife and I took over, we obviously saw it happening. We started to change the focus of the company, not forgetting our roots, not forgetting the winter goods, because that's very important. But what can we do to find additional counter-seasonal de-ice or counter-seasonal cash flow? So what we did is we started to get into pool salts, which was a perfect fit since we work with salts already. Let's start distributing and packing our own pool salts. Well, that found a diatomaceous earth for pool filters. I tend to have a reputation as I rarely say no. If it's an opportunity for us to pack something or make something or introduce something to the consumer, to the retailer, thus the consumer, and our name can be on it, I'm ecstatic. We took that calcium chloride product that we're most famous for in the flake form, and we introduced a calcium hardness increaser for pools and spas. And we're going to continue to grow that pool side of the company. We do some private label packing on fertilizers. So I walk into big stores, I walk into big chains, and I see our product in there. It's not under our name, but we pack fertilizers for companies. We're getting into our own fertilizers line as well. We've introduced some anti-skid products for the people that are strictly environmentally sound, where they don't want to use any chemicals on their walkway. There's anti-skid that they can use in the winter months. So we continue to change what we're doing by evolving and changing, not relying 100% on the snow, and saying we can do this year round, maintaining, as I said, the family of workers that we have here because they've been with us for many years.
With the pool salts, I was a lifeguard, and when I was much younger in a past life, we always had chlorinated pools. What is that? Can you explain that a little bit to me?
I'm the first to say I'm the worst person to try to explain it, but somehow the salt goes through some ionization process that creates chlorine. It makes it it's cleaner, it's easier on your skin. They even say it's good on your hair. Not that I have much to worry about, but it is a much better fit, and it's much more economical than buying chlorine, which is also very harsh to the environment and very harsh to the person swimming in it.
And the person cleaning the pool and being the lifeguard there, I can speak from personal experience on that one. For those who aren't familiar, what should consumers consider when selecting ice melt for safety on different surfaces such as concrete, asphalt, and wood? I know we mentioned before that some of these things have, different impacts on surfaces.
Without a doubt. So concrete's the number one that everyone talks about. And the first thing that ice melt has a reputation is, it's going to destroy my walkway. It's going to destroy my concrete. Listen, it has happened. There's reasons behind why product, what happens to your concrete. So the first thing you've got to know is, how old is your concrete? And we'll talk strictly on concrete right now. We do not recommend the use of any de-icer on concrete if it's not at least 2 years old. I also don't recommend using de-icer on a slab of concrete that maybe you used a ready mix and did it yourself. Use a professional. Don't go, you can go and spend a ton of money, a small fortune on a new walkway. And if the person that's laying the concrete was to take a shortcut and not mix it correctly, not put the right strength test in, and they don't do it correctly, you're only going to have failure down the line. Now, as I said earlier, it's the freeze-thaw cycle that causes damage to the given walkway, the concrete. So to better explain, we'll pick on the rock salt again. Concrete's very porous. Think of it as a sponge. That brine solution gets into those pores of the concrete. Now, concrete is blended and it's mixed and laid for stresses, natural stresses. Freeze-thaw cycles happen without the use of deicers. Just melts and then tomorrow it's freezing again. It's just the way it is. So that brine solution sits in that pores of the concrete. When the temperature drops below its effective temperature, it freezes, expands, and causes stress on the concrete. Now, concrete can handle those stresses. Good quality concrete can handle those stresses. If it's too young, if it's not laid properly, if there were shortcuts made, especially by the person laying the concrete, there could cause is setting you up for failure right there. Now, calcium chloride, my Qik Joe ice melt, again, causes less freeze-thaw cycles, which again would lend you to have a safer, at least, outcome, where you're not going to have the cracking on the concrete. Application rates go into play as well on the concrete, but again, we talked about that. You want a product at the lowest possible application rate to maintain safety. Now, asphalt, it's kind of that can handle a lot more. You know, you can use ice melters on asphalt after you've just laid the asphalt. The only thing you might see with asphalt is you might see wet spots on asphalt. It happens where that liquid brine, especially if you over-apply. Over-application is the worst thing anyone can do. If you over-apply, wet spots might form on the asphalt. It will dissipate over time. Or I always tell anyone, soapy, sudsy hot water, especially in the spring. Don't do it in the wintertime. You might have a bigger problem.
Yeah, right.
But that'll clean it up. Now, wood is a different animal all in and of itself. I don't recommend using a deicer on any wood products.
Oh, okay.
Mainly because deicers will draw moisture and it may cause the wood to become brittle. When you're using a deicer, there are times you must use a deicer. Say you have an ice spot. Recommended using sparingly, sweep it off the wood, because you don't want to have problems down the line where you're starting to have your wood splinter. You got to be careful on that. When you're choosing a deicer, it goes back to that, what's its effective temperature? But keep in mind, ice melt industry plays, this is the part of the ice melt industry that I'm not real happy with. They play the game of the practical temperature versus eutectic temperature. So if I was a rock salt supplier, only a rock salt supplier, I can tell you my product works below 0. But you're going to say, wait a minute, you told me it doesn't work below 22. You're right. Practical in the world that we live, outside your front door, rock salt stops working at 22 above 0. But if you were to take that same product and put it in a lab setting, testing it with no fluctuations, no wind, nothing that's going to create any variation in that product's performance, well, guess what it works to? It works below 0. That would be 1, 2, 3, 5 below. So be very cautious on what they're selling and be very much aware of what's in the bag and what they're trying to say, what's on the bag. Where calcium chloride, I can tell you it works below 70 below 0 Fahrenheit. Well, that's not a realistic number. It really is 25 below 0. But if you took that same product in a lab setting, it works to a temperature that's not even realistic, that you'd be a fool to try to sprinkle ice melt out anyway. So know what its practical effective temperature is. You want to make sure that what the application rates are, going back to that, and I keep stressing that the more you use isn't always the better alternative or the better solution, because it could cause problems with your concrete, puddling, on your asphalt, or even getting into into your flower beds. The speed of the product. If you were to sprinkle ice melt rock salt and you know that it needs a catalyst, well, don't expect that it's going to start working immediately until it gets a catalyst. Again, back to the catalyst being people walking on it, which isn't always safe, or the sun coming out, or maybe the temperature's rising. Where you know calcium chloride is going to be literally starting immediately. And then the last one is clean up the residue. You know, the residue sitting there, people over apply. And until you learn what the application rate really, even though it's telling you 2 to 4 ounces or 6 to 8 ounces, you might be putting a cup per square yard. That's a lot of product. You either better sweep it off or shovel it off.
That makes sense. And definitely, yeah, I'm just thinking you don't want to mess your deck up. You don't want to have splinters in the spring. It got me thinking about that a little bit. Yeah, no, not good at all. So how does Qik Joe fit into the broader conversation about environmental responsibility in winter products? I know we're kind of touching on this a little bit.
It never went away. It never just all of a sudden appeared. It was everyone knew that, you know, again, we have to make sure that we're use environmentally friendly products, use products that are safe. You know, let's be honest, we're not putting, God forbid, hydrochloric acid on our walkway to clean the ices. No, I'm sure it would work well.
Be a bit overkill, maybe.
Maybe overkill, exactly. It goes back to our products, and we offer more than just Qik Joe ice melt. I mean, we have an array of products. The Qik Joe Instant Ice Melter, our Polar Express, which is a premium blend, our Quad Melts, which have a special additive and a CMA, calcium magnesium acetate, and our PET products. Every one of our products is formulated specifically to that lower application rate. That's number one. Having less product on the walkway yields to less product to have to sweep off, less product to have to go into your flower beds, less product that may brown your vegetation. It could happen. You know, people with weeds use rock salt in the summertime to try to kill their weeds. Although the weeds come back, that I know. So whatever, you can't win.
It's their world. We're just living in it.
Be made with exactly. But that's how we make sure that we're formulating it for lower application rate, being sensitive to the given area. Now, the one product I mentioned, my Quad Melt, CMA, calcium magnesium acetate, that product is non-corrosive and not toxic. Now, some additives out there that people have used, we use all non-toxic additives, whether it be our coloring agents or our catalyst activator, they're all non-toxic. You want to make sure that when you're putting a product out there, and I'm going to say the reputable ice melt companies are all on the same page. Let's make sure we're putting products that are safe to not only the environment, but safe to the user. You know, God forbid, if you were to use a product that burned the user upon application, well, you got a bigger problem. You've got to be very sensitive to that, and you have to look beyond the sell. If all you're there for is a quick sale, then you should be getting out of that industry and shouldn't be selling anything, because that's just it's not ethical.
So John, with Qik Joe working so fast on ice melt, do you think it could help me melt the awkwardness with my neighbor when I forget their name when I'm walking out of the house in the morning?
Maybe if you were to hand them a shaker jug.
Okay, shaker jug.
And maybe they, you know, say, since I have one at my house, can you write your name on yours? So maybe you could do that.
That's a good trick. I like that. So, I mean, really, our last question for today really is just, so finally, are there any practices you'd suggest for safe and effective use of ice melt? Any winter prep, more generally speaking, that you think could help people and help the environment?
Well, winter prep, number one, obviously we're kind of and we've had a few snowstorms, but prior to the winter starting, check your walkway. Make sure there's no cracks. Things happen over the years, you know, whether it's old concrete, it breaks down because for whatever reason. Make sure you can repair those cracks, or repair where the concrete's starting to break, or be aware of where those cracks are when you were applying. If you can repair those cracks, once you repair them, also be aware that's fresh patch. Be aware of where you're putting your ice melt, because you might damage the patch, because again, remember, don't use ice melter on 2 years. So another good safety is to seal given walkway. Seal your asphalt, seal your concrete, make sure that you're prepared for that in that aspect. Look for where the drainage is. Make sure if you've got a prized flower bed and everything's running towards that, maybe you can make some whether you make a little berm or something like where it's going to run away, try to stop the wash going into that. And then, of course, people can apply snow fences to help drifting, so you don't have big areas on that. Now, the other part of prep is to know your product. Know your given product and what you're using. There are products, and that's why we've introduced so many de-icers over the years. Not every product is for every person or town, region. So what we've done is we offer this whole array of products, but know the product you're using and know the application rates. Use it correctly. And remember, ice melters are it's a good complement to a little sweeping and shoveling of the snow yourself. If you have 3, 4, 5 inches of snow, you're not putting anything on there that's going to
get shoveled. Yeah.
You got to shovel it off. And I am a big proponent of pre-treats. I love pre-treating the given walkway. Now we have a liquid pre-treater. There's other products out there that you can add. There's beet juice. There's items some of them are a little trendy, but you can pre-treat with your granular product. Remember, if you sprinkle your blend that's rock salt oriented and you sprinkle it on and it snows, well, that liquid brine is now going to be created by the solution falling. And now you have a solution that's going to help prevent the ice from bonding with the walkway, which causes those terrible ice patches that you can never get rid of.
So a little pre-planning, a little common sense, a little Qik Joe, you're off to the races.
No doubt.
Well, this has been a great conversation, John. I really appreciate you coming on the show today. Today we had on our show John Wesolowski, president of Milazzo Industries, makers of Qik Joe. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. Thank you so very much. If you're interested in learning more about Milazzo Industries and their signature product Qik Joe, visit milazzoindustries.com. That's Milazzo with 2 Z's. Thank you for turning into Shelf Confidence. If you enjoyed today's episode, please smash that subscribe and like button, share with your friends, review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Until next time, I'm John Zimmerman, and this is Shelf Confidence.